Let me take you back to a time when life felt simple, and my biggest worry was deciding what to cook for dinner. I had recently moved into Willow Creek, a neighborhood that looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine. The houses were neat, the streets spotless, and the lawns so perfectly trimmed they could pass for golf courses. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of. A place where my kids could ride their bikes safely, where neighbors greeted each other warmly, and where weekends meant lazy mornings sipping coffee on the porch. But there was something about Willow Creek that should have tipped me off right away. How perfect everything seemed. Every mailbox stood at exactly the same height. Every flower bed followed the same color scheme, and no car dared park on the street overnight. At first, I thought it added charm to the place. Now, looking back, I realize it was suffocating. The Homeowners Association, or HOA as everyone called it, ran the show here. They weren't just about keeping things tidy. They were obsessed with control. Rules governed almost everything, from the shade of paint you could use on your front door to how long your garbage cans could stay outside. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, rules are part of living in a community, right? But then came Karen Westfield. She wasn't just any neighbor. She was the queen bee of the HOA, tall, with her hair always styled to perfection, and wearing outfits that screamed, "I shop at expensive stores." Karen made sure everyone knew she meant business. She carried around a clipboard like it was her royal scepter, ready to jot down violations faster than you could say, "Oops." One sunny Saturday morning, while I was enjoying my second cup of coffee on the porch, I saw Karen marching toward my house. Her face was red, and she clutched that infamous clipboard tightly against her chest. My stomach dropped because deep down, I already knew this wasn't going to end well. "Detective Harper," she began, her voice overly sweet but laced with authority, "we need to address a serious issue." I raised an eyebrow, trying not to let my irritation show. "What's the problem, Karen?" She pointed dramatically at my driveway. "Yes, my driveway." "Your driveway is not up to code," she declared, as if she'd just discovered a crime scene. I blinked, confused. "Up to code? What do you mean?" Karen sighed heavily, as though explaining basic math to a child. "According to Section 7.3 of the HOA guidelines, driveways must be sealed with a specific charcoal gray sealant. Yours is plain asphalt." I stared at her, dumbfounded. Plain asphalt. That was the big deal. I'd spent weeks saving money to repave my old, cracked driveway, and now she was telling me it wasn't good enough. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "But last I checked, there's no law requiring me to seal my driveway unless it poses a safety hazard." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Detective Harper, this isn't about laws. This is about maintaining property values. Your non-compliant driveway is bringing down the entire neighborhood." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Bringing down the neighborhood. Over a driveway. I wanted to laugh, but the look on her face told me she was dead serious. For a moment, I considered arguing further, but instead, I nodded politely and promised to look into it. Deep down, though, I figured she'd forget about it within a week. After all, people like Karen usually move on once they realize they can't win. The days following Karen's visit were quiet, almost too quiet. I told myself to let it go, that she'd probably found someone else to bother by now. After all, this was Willow Creek, a place where everyone seemed to have something to hide or something to complain about. Surely, my driveway wasn't the only thing on her radar, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done with me. She had a way of lingering in your mind, like an annoying song you can't get out of your head. A few mornings later, as I was leaving for work, I noticed a small white envelope tucked under my doormat. My stomach sank when I saw the official HOA logo stamped on the front. Inside was a formal letter written in crisp, professional language. It outlined the violation of my driveway not meeting aesthetic standards and gave me 30 days to comply or face fines. The tone was polite but firm, like a teacher scolding a student who hadn't turned in their homework. I crumpled the letter in frustration. This was absurd. A fine. For a driveway. I had bills to pay, groceries to buy, and 2 kids whose soccer cleats didn't come cheap. The last thing I needed was some petty tyrant nickel and diming me over something as trivial as sealant color. Still, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe if I ignored it long enough, Karen would back off. People like her thrived on attention, right? If I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction, perhaps she'd lose interest. But Karen wasn't the type to let things slide. Over the next week, I started noticing little things, signs that she was watching me. One afternoon, while mowing the lawn, I glanced across the street and caught her peeking through her curtains. Another time, I saw her chatting animatedly with Mr. Peterson, the HOA president, as they both stared in the direction of my house. It was subtle, but it was there, a constant reminder that I was being scrutinized. Then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, barely noticeable. Neighbors who used to wave hello suddenly avoided eye contact. Conversations at the mailbox turned awkward, filled with forced smiles and quick exits. I even overheard Mrs. Harper from across the street telling someone, "You don't want to end up like Detective Harper." Her voice was low, almost conspiratorial, and it sent a chill down my spine. What bothered me most wasn't the judgment, it was the isolation. Willow Creek had felt like home when we first moved in, but now it felt like a stage where everyone was waiting for me to trip up. Even my kids picked up on the tension. One evening, my youngest asked why Mrs. Westfield always looked so mad when she passed our house. I didn't know how to answer without sounding bitter, so I just shrugged and changed the subject. By the end of the week, the pressure was mounting. Every glance, every hushed conversation felt like another brick added to the wall between me and the rest of the neighborhood. And then, late one night, I received a text from Sarah, the woman who lived next door. "Be careful," she wrote. "Karen's been talking about taking action." Action? Against what? My driveway. I wanted to laugh, but the knot in my stomach said otherwise. Something about this situation felt bigger than just asphalt and sealant. It wasn't about property values or aesthetics anymore. It was personal. Karen had drawn a line in the sand, and crossing it meant more than breaking a rule. It meant challenging her authority. As much as I hated to admit it, I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. Whatever battle was brewing, I needed to prepare for it. Because if Karen thought she could push me around, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The tension in Willow Creek was growing thicker by the day, and I could feel it pressing down on me like a storm cloud that refused to break. Every morning as I left for work, I half expected to find another letter from the HOA waiting for me. A fresh reminder of how my life had become entangled with Karen's obsession over rules no one else seemed to care about. But what happened next wasn't just another warning or fine. It was something far more ridiculous and infuriating. On Monday evening, after a long shift at the station, I pulled into my driveway, exhausted and ready to unwind. The house was quiet. My kids were already asleep, and Tom was upstairs reading. I grabbed my bag from the car and headed inside, eager to put the day behind me. That's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was dispatch calling. Detective Harper. The operator said hesitantly, "We've received a call reporting an illegal activity at your residence. Are you available to respond?" My heart sank. Illegal activity. At my house. What on earth was going on? I told them I'd be there in 10 minutes, though confusion gnawed at me the entire drive back home. When I turned onto my street, my jaw dropped. 2 patrol cars were parked outside my house, their lights flashing ominously in the dark. Standing near them, arms crossed and looking smugger than ever, was Karen Westfield. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, approaching me cautiously, "we received a report that you've been violating local ordinances regarding..." He glanced awkwardly at his notes. Driveway aesthetics. I blinked twice, certain I'd misheard him. Driveway aesthetics. Karen stepped forward, her voice dripping with self-righteous indignation. Yes, this is exactly what I've been trying to explain. Detective Harper refuses to comply with the HOA guidelines, and now she's dragging the whole neighborhood down. The absurdity of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. Karen had called 911 over a driveway. My driveway. The same driveway I'd spent weeks repaving because the old one was falling apart. Now, actual police resources were being wasted on something so trivial that even the officers looked uncomfortable. "Well," I said slowly, turning to Karen, "you really went all out this time, didn't you?" Her face flushed red, but she held her ground. "This isn't a joke, Detective Harper. You're ignoring the rules, and someone needed to do something about it." At that moment, I realized two things. First, Karen was completely serious. Second, this wasn't just about my driveway anymore. It was about power. She wanted to prove that she could control me, that her rules mattered more than common sense. And honestly, part of me admired her audacity. Most people wouldn't have the guts to escalate something like this to such an extreme level. But admiration quickly gave way to determination. If Karen wanted to play hardball, I was ready to step up. Turning back to the officers, I adopted my most professional tone. "Officers, clearly, this isn't a criminal matter. However, if Ms. Westfield feels strongly enough to involve law enforcement, perhaps we should investigate further. After all, public safety is paramount." Karen's grin faltered slightly, but she nodded eagerly. "Yes, thank you for taking this seriously." Oh, I was taking it seriously, all right. Dead seriously. Over the next hour, I led what can only be described as the world's most absurd investigation. We measured the slope of my driveway to ensure it met accessibility standards. Spoiler, it did. We tested the surface temperature to confirm it wouldn't cause any hazards in extreme weather. It wouldn't. One of the officers even joked about checking for oil leaks using forensic kits. By the end of it, everyone except Karen was laughing, including the officers who'd initially shown up expecting a real emergency. As the scene wrapped up, I couldn't help but notice the look of disbelief on Karen's face. She hadn't expected this kind of pushback. In fact, she probably thought I'd fold under the pressure. But instead, I turned her own game against her and made sure the whole neighborhood knew about it too. The fallout from Karen's ill-fated 911 call spread faster than I could have imagined. By Tuesday morning, the entire neighborhood seemed to know what had happened. Word travels quickly in a place like Willow Creek, where everyone is either gossiping or eavesdropping, or both. But this wasn't just idle chatter. It was full-blown spectacle. And thanks to a few carefully timed comments during the investigation, I made sure the story reached its full comedic and humiliating potential. As I left for work the next day, I noticed neighbors peeking through their curtains, whispering behind cupped hands. Mrs. Harper, who usually avoided eye contact, gave me an awkward wave while trying not to laugh. Even Mr. Peterson, the ever-stoic HOA president, looked uncomfortable as he hurried past my house without so much as a nod. The air felt different somehow, lighter, almost triumphant. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I didn't feel like the outsider being judged. Instead, I felt like the unlikely hero of a very strange story. But the real fireworks started online. Someone, probably Sarah, my neighbor with a flair for social media drama, posted about the incident in a local community group. Within hours, screenshots of the HOA Handbook's infamous Section 7.3 were circulating alongside memes featuring Karen's face photoshopped onto exaggerated images of driveways. One particularly clever post showed a driveway paved entirely in gold bricks with the caption, "Karen approved luxury." The comments exploded with laughter and disbelief. And soon enough, the story caught the attention of the local news. By lunchtime, reporters were calling the station asking for statements. Thankfully, my captain found the whole thing hilarious and gave them a vague but supportive response. Detective Harper handled the situation with professionalism and humor, reminding us all that perspective is important, even when dealing with unconventional complaints. Karen, meanwhile, became a laughingstock. She tried to defend herself in the HOA chat group, insisting that her actions were justified and accusing everyone else of misunderstanding her intentions. But no one was buying it. Her messages were met with sarcastic emojis and thinly veiled mockery. Even those who normally sided with her kept their distance, unwilling to be associated with the growing embarrassment. Still, I knew Karen wouldn't let this go quietly. People like her don't back down easily. They double down. And true to form, she showed up at the next HOA meeting ready to fight. Armed with her clipboard and a stack of printed documents, she launched into a tirade about how my defiance was setting a dangerous precedent for the neighborhood. If we allow one person to ignore the rules, she declared, pointing dramatically at me, then chaos will follow. Her words might have carried weight if half the room hadn't been stifling giggles. Some members exchanged knowing glances, while others openly rolled their eyes. Even Mr. Peterson seemed exasperated, though he tried to maintain his usual air of authority. When Karen finally finished her speech, there was an awkward silence before someone muttered under their breath, "Maybe we should focus on actual problems." That comment broke the dam. Suddenly, people began speaking up, not against me, but against Karen. One homeowner mentioned how tired they were of nitpicking rules that served no real purpose. Another pointed out that many of the guidelines hadn't been updated in decades and didn't reflect modern needs. Before long, the meeting devolved into a heated debate about whether the HOA had overstepped its boundaries. I sat quietly through it all, letting the tide turn on its own. Karen's face turned redder with each passing minute, her grip on the clipboard tightening until her knuckles went white. For once, she was outnumbered and powerless to stop it. When the meeting adjourned, I walked out feeling a mix of satisfaction and relief. Karen avoided looking at me, muttering something about misguided priorities as she stormed off. It was clear she hadn't expected the backlash, and frankly, neither had I. But one thing was certain: I'd struck a nerve and exposed the cracks in the foundation of Willow Creek's so-called perfection. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. And Karen, well, she learned the hard way that even the most polished facades can crumble under pressure. The aftermath of the HOA meeting left Karen in a precarious position. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was furious. The woman who had once strutted around Willow Creek like she owned the place now avoided eye contact with her neighbors. Her clipboard, once a symbol of authority, seemed more like a shield she used to hide behind whenever someone passed her on the street. But if she thought I was going to let this go quietly, she was sorely mistaken. I decided it was time to take things a step further. After all, Karen had dragged my name and my driveway through the mud. It was only fair that I returned the favor, albeit in a much subtler way. At the next HOA meeting, I submitted a formal proposal to amend the rules regarding driveways. My suggestion: add language requiring any future complaints to include documented evidence of actual harm, not just hurt feelings or vague notions of property value. When I presented the motion, the room fell silent. Karen's jaw dropped as she realized what I was doing. She tried to argue, of course, claiming that such changes would lead to chaos and anarchy. But the rest of the board members weren't buying it anymore. They'd seen how petty and excessive Karen's behavior had become, and they were tired of it. One by one, they voted in favor of my amendment. When the final tally was announced, Karen looked like she'd been slapped. But I wasn't done yet. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I could too. A few days later, I filed a formal complaint with the City Council about the misuse of emergency services. While nothing legally actionable came of it, the scathing report ensured that Karen would think twice before dialing 911 again, unless there was an actual emergency. The mayor even sent a letter commending me for handling the situation with professionalism, which somehow made its way into the hands of every homeowner in Willow Creek. Karen's reputation was in tatters. People who had once feared her now openly mocked her. Some even started calling her Driveway Karen behind her back, a nickname that stuck like glue. Every time I saw her glaring at my perfectly functional driveway, I couldn't help but smile. She wanted perfection, but instead, she got humiliation served cold. Still, the most satisfying part of all this wasn't the public shaming or the policy changes. It was the shift in the neighborhood dynamic. Neighbors who had once kept their distance began reaching out to me. Sarah invited us over for dinner, thanking me for standing up to Karen. Even Mr. Peterson admitted privately that he'd grown tired of Karen's antics and appreciated my pushback. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt like part of the community, not because I conformed, but because I dared to challenge the status quo. As weeks turned into months, life in Willow Creek began to change. The HOA meetings became less about nitpicking trivial violations and more about addressing real issues, like improving streetlights and organizing community events. Homeowners started speaking up, questioning outdated rules and pushing for reforms. And while Karen still attended the meetings, her influence had waned significantly. She sat quietly in the corner, scribbling notes no one cared about, her reign of terror effectively over. For me, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about winning. It's about inspiring others to do the same. Karen may have thought she was untouchable, but her obsession with control ultimately exposed her own flaws. And in doing so, she gave the rest of us permission to breathe a little easier. Now, when I look at my driveway, I don't see plain asphalt. I see resilience. It's a reminder that even the smallest acts of defiance can spark meaningful change. And if Karen ever decides to pick another fight, well, let's just say I'll be ready. The battle with Karen wasn't just about my driveway anymore. It had become a turning point for Willow Creek. The absurdity of her 911 call and the subsequent drama forced everyone to take a hard look at how things were run around here. For years, the HOA had operated like an unchallenged monarchy, enforcing rules that ranged from ridiculous to outright invasive. But now, cracks were forming in their polished facade, and I was determined to widen them. One evening, after another tense HOA meeting where Karen tried, and failed, to regain control, I sat down with Tom to brainstorm. "We need to keep pushing," I said, tapping my pen against the kitchen table. "This isn't just about us. It's about making sure no one else has to deal with this kind of nonsense." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "What if we got people talking? Like really talking? Maybe organize something, a neighborhood event or petition." That's when it hit me. Transparency. If Karen thrived on secrecy and fear, then sunlight was her worst enemy. I decided to host a casual community coffee morning at my house, inviting neighbors to come chat about their experiences with the HOA. I didn't advertise it as some grand rebellion, just a chance for folks to share stories over coffee and donuts. Word spread quickly, though, and by Saturday morning, my living room was packed with curious faces. At first, people were hesitant to speak up. Decades of tiptoeing around the HOA had taught them to stay quiet. But once Sarah shared her story about receiving a violation notice for hanging wind chimes in her backyard, the floodgates opened. One neighbor talked about being fined for leaving his garbage cans out 10 minutes too late. Another admitted she'd been too scared to repaint her front door because the approved color options looked like they belonged in a hospital. Each story added fuel to the fire, and soon the room buzzed with energy. Encouraged by the turnout, I suggested creating a formal feedback system. Why not let homeowners submit anonymous suggestions for improving the HOA guidelines? I proposed. That way, we can address real concerns without anyone feeling targeted. The idea was met with enthusiastic nods. Over the next few weeks, dozens of suggestions poured in, from simplifying the rulebook to eliminating outdated policies altogether. Armed with these proposals, I attended the next HOA meeting ready to push for real change. This time, I wasn't alone. Several neighbors joined me, eager to support the cause. Karen, predictably, fought back with everything she had. She accused us of undermining the HOA's mission and warned of chaos if we loosened restrictions. But her arguments fell flat. Even Mr. Peterson seemed weary of her theatrics, nodding along as I presented our case. By the end of the meeting, the board agreed to review the guidelines, a small victory, but a significant step forward. Still, I knew Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. She began campaigning behind the scenes, rallying her dwindling group of loyalists to oppose any changes. Flyers appeared on mailboxes urging residents to protect Willow Creek's standards. But her efforts only backfired. Instead of rallying support, she highlighted just how out of touch she was. Neighbors joked openly about her desperation, and attendance at HOA meetings soared, not to side with Karen, but to ensure her voice didn't dominate. By the time summer rolled around, Willow Creek felt different. Conversations flowed more freely, laughter echoed through the streets again, and homes reflected their owners' personalities rather than rigid rules. My driveway remained unsealed, standing as a quiet testament to the power of standing your ground. And while Karen still lingered in the background, her influence had faded into near irrelevance. Looking back, I realized this fight wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming our community. We took a stand against pettiness and control, proving that sometimes the simplest acts of defiance can spark the biggest changes. As for Karen, well, she learned the hard way that even queens lose their crowns when they forget who they're supposed to serve. Life in Willow Creek has settled into a rhythm that feels almost normal. The kind of normal where you don't have to double-check your curtains or worry about someone lurking outside with a clipboard. It's not perfect, because let's face it, no neighborhood is, but it's real. And after months of drama and absurdity, real feels pretty good. Karen still lives across the street, but these days, she keeps her head down. Gone are the dramatic speeches at HOA meetings and the smug glares during morning walks. Instead, she scurries past my house like she's hoping I won't notice her. Occasionally, I catch her staring at my driveway, probably wondering how something so ordinary could cause such a ruckus. But honestly, I don't think she'll ever understand. To Karen, rules were sacred, an unbreakable code that held the fabric of society together. To me, they were guidelines meant to enhance life, not suffocate it. The HOA itself has undergone a transformation. No longer the iron-fisted enforcer it once was, it now operates more like a collaborative group focused on practical issues rather than trivial complaints. The rulebook has been trimmed down significantly, with outdated policies eliminated entirely. Homeowners can paint their doors whatever color they want, within reason, hang wind chimes without fear of reprisal, and even park their cars in driveways overnight without triggering an inspection squad. Progress isn't always fast, but it's steady, and that's enough for now. As for my driveway, it's become something of a local legend. Neighbors joke about it whenever we cross paths, calling it the driveway that took down Karen. Kids sometimes draw chalk art on it, knowing full well that I'd never report them to the HOA. Even Tom has embraced its symbolic status, often quipping, "If they mess with the driveway, they mess with us." But beyond the jokes and the symbolism lies a deeper truth. Standing up for yourself, or your driveway, can inspire others to do the same. After seeing what happened with Karen, people started speaking out about other frustrations they'd silently endured for years. One family successfully petitioned to install solar panels despite initial resistance from the board. Another convinced the city to repair a long-neglected pothole near the entrance of our street. These victories may seem small individually, but together, they've reshaped the spirit of Willow Creek. The neighborhood feels lighter now, less burdened by the weight of perfectionism. There's still pride in keeping things tidy, sure, but there's also room for imperfection, for humanity. Wildflowers bloom in some yards instead of manicured hedges. Kids' toys occasionally spill onto front lawns. And yes, sometimes you'll see a stray sneaker left on a porch step. But none of that detracts from the beauty of this place. If anything, it enhances it. Every now and then, I think about Karen. Not out of anger or resentment, but curiosity. What must it feel like to build your identity around control only to lose it completely? Does she regret her actions, or does she still believe she was right? I'll probably never know. And honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is that Willow Creek moved forward while she stayed stuck in the past. So here I am, sipping coffee on my porch, watching the world wake up around me. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And that's worth far more than any charcoal gray sealant or HOA handbook. My driveway stands as a reminder that sometimes the simplest things can spark the biggest changes. And if anyone ever tries to tell me otherwise, well, let's just say I'm ready.